All right, so today we're diving into the world of procurement and supply chains. I have to admit, when I first saw these notes, I thought, oh boy, this is going to be a tough one. It all seems a bit, well, dry, you
Yes,
know?
okay, I get that. It's not exactly the most glamorous topic at first glance.
Right. But then I started skimming through and I realized there's actually some seriously interesting stuff here. Like, who knew that buying a cup of coffee could be so complicated?
Yeah, it's really fascinating how these concepts, procurement, supply chains, all that, they're not just about big business or, complex industries.
So it's about more than just getting the best price on a bulk order of paper clips.
Way more. It's about understanding the journey of a product, from the raw materials, like the beans for your coffee, all the way to your hand wrapped around that warm mug, and all the steps, and I mean all of them, in between.
Okay, so it's like a chain reaction, but with products.
Exactly. And each link in that chain, each step in the process, that's where things get interesting.
Okay, I think I'm starting to get it. But my notes mention added value a lot. What does that even mean in this context? Is it just about getting the cheapest price?
That's a really important point. And no, it's definitely not just about getting the cheapest price. Think of it like this. You're building a house,
Okay, I'm following
so
you.
you could just buy the cheapest bricks and timber. Right.
But
But what if those materials are sourced unethically? Like maybe it's destroying a rainforest somewhere. Or maybe the people making those bricks aren't paid a fair wage. That's where added value comes in.
so it's about thinking beyond the price tag.
Exactly. It's about those ethical considerations, the environmental impact, even things like transparency in the supply chain.
That makes me think about the rise of sustainable brands. They're often a bit more expensive, but people are willing to pay more because they believe in what the company stands for.
Precisely. Consumers are becoming more and more aware of where their products come from and how they're made. And that's having a ripple effect all the way back up the supply chain.
So it's like a feedback loop. Consumers are demanding more ethical and sustainable practices, and that's changing how businesses approach procurement.
Exactly. Companies are realizing that things like ethical sourcing, transparency, sustainability, those aren't just buzzwords. They're opportunities to create real value.
This is way more interesting than I thought it would be. Okay, so we've established that procurement and supply chains are about far more than just getting a bargain. But let's get back to the basics for a second. My notes mention the 5 rights of procurement. What are those and why are they so important?
Ah, the 5 rights. Think of them as the golden rules of procurement. They're all about making sure you're getting the right quantity, the right quality at the right time, to the right place, and at the right price.
Okay, and that actually does sound pretty important. But can you give me an example? Like, what happens when one of those rights goes wrong?
Well, imagine you're a car manufacturer, and a critical shipment of, say, engine parts arrives late because of a supplier error. Your whole production line could grind to a halt. You're losing time, money, all because something went wrong in the supply chain.
Ouch. That's a painful example.
Yeah,
Okay, so those 5 rights, they're really about keeping the whole operation running smoothly.
exactly. And that's where effective supply chain management comes in, making sure all those moving parts work together seamlessly.
It's like a perfectly choreographed dance. One misstep and the whole thing falls apart.
Exactly. And just like in dance, timing is everything.
Speaking of timing, my notes mention something called the CIPS procurement cycle. It sounds kind of intimidating, like some complex machine with a million moving parts. Can you break it down for me? What is that?
It's not as scary as it sounds. Basically, the Chartered Institute of Procurement and Supply, CIPS, they created this framework.
Okay.
It's a roadmap for organizations to manage their procurement activities. So it helps them make informed decisions every step of the way, from identifying what they need
To actually get in it, using it, even figuring out if it worked well.
You got it. It's about taking a strategic, holistic approach. So you're not just reacting to like, oh, we're out of pens, quick, order more. It's about thinking long term.
Okay, that makes sense. But how does this cycle actually work in practice?
Well, say your company needs new software.
Okay.
Instead of just Googling software and picking the first thing that pops up.
Which, let's be honest, we've all been there.
Right. But the CIPS cycle forces you to pump the brakes.
I like that. Pump the brakes. So what's the first step?
Asking the right questions. What do we actually need this software to do? What are our must-haves versus our nice-to-haves? What's our budget? What could go wrong? And how can we prevent it?
So it's about laying a good foundation before you even start building.
Precisely. Then you can start researching suppliers. Who's out there? Are they reliable? Have they done this kind of work before?
It's like choosing a contractor to renovate your house. You don't just want to hire the first person who hands you a flyer.
Exactly. You want someone you can trust, who understands your vision. That's why choosing the right supplier is super important. This CIPS cycle thing, it really emphasizes doing your due diligence. Check them out, compare what they're offering, and negotiate a good deal.
So it's about building relationships, not just treating suppliers like, what, vending machines?
Exactly. A good relationship with your suppliers can be so valuable. Better communication, better quality, maybe even lower cost down the line.
Okay, I can see that. But what happens after you've chosen your supplier, you've signed the contract? Is that it? Is the CIPS cycle done?
Not even close. The cycle keeps going, even after the contract is signed. Now it's about managing that relationship, making sure the supplier is doing what they're supposed to be doing.
So you don't just sign and forget about it. You have to stay on top of it.
Exactly. You got to be proactive. Address any problems that come up, track how things are going, and make sure everyone's on the same page.
Okay, that all makes sense. But let's be real. Paperwork can be a real drag. And I'm betting procurement involves a lot of it, right? Is there any way to make it less, well, tedious?
Well, that's where technology swoops in to save the day. You mentioned e-procurement in your notes, right? That's what
Yeah.
we're talking about. Using tech to make the whole procurement process smoother.
Oh, I like the sound of that. So what are we talking, robots and self-driving trucks delivering our office supplies now?
We're not there yet, though it's probably not too far off. But yeah, e-procurement, it's a whole range of technologies and systems that are changing how businesses buy and sell stuff.
So instead of drowning in a sea of paper invoices and purchase orders, I can just click a button and make it all go away.
You got it. Think of it like online platforms where you can scroll through catalogs of products, compare prices from different suppliers, all that, and then just place your order with a few clicks.
Sign me up. That sounds way more efficient. But what are some real-world examples of how this e-procurement thing actually works?
Well, lots of companies now use electronic systems for purchase requisitions. So instead of having to fill out a paper form and get like 5 different signatures.
Oh, I hate those forms.
Right. With this, someone could just submit a request online and it goes through the system automatically.
So much faster and less chance of things getting lost in the shuffle.
Exactly. And then there are e-auctions. Imagine like a digital marketplace where suppliers can bid on your business in real time. You might end up getting a much better price than you would have otherwise.
Okay, so it's like eBay for businesses. I like it. Are there any other benefits to using e-procurement besides just saving time and, not having to deal with so much paperwork?
Oh, definitely. E-procurement can also make everything more transparent. You have a digital record of every transaction.
So less room for shady stuff.
Exactly. It's
Hmm.
easier to track where your money's going, make sure everyone's following the rules, all of that.
That makes a lot of sense, especially for bigger companies or organizations where transparency is super important. It's like having a built-in watchdog. But with all this talk about technology and efficiency, it's easy to forget that procurement and supply chains, it's still people making the decisions, right?
100%. Tech can be a powerful tool, but it's only as good as the people using it. And that's why understanding the people involved in procurement, what motivates them, what their priorities are, is crucial.
Okay, so let's talk about the people. My notes mention stakeholders. Who are they and what role do they play in all of this?
Think of stakeholders as anyone who has a stake in how a company buys stuff. So that could be people inside the company, like employees and managers,
Right.
but it can also be people outside the company, like suppliers, customers, even the community where the company operates.
So it's about thinking about the impact these decisions have on everyone, not just the bottom line.
Exactly. And each of these stakeholder groups, they come to the table with their own set of priorities and concerns.
Which probably aren't always aligned, right?
Right. And figuring out how to balance all of those different perspectives, that's a big part of effective procurement.
Okay, I see how that could get complicated. Can you give me some examples of how different stakeholder groups might influence a procurement decision?
Absolutely. Let's say you're a big company and you're deciding where to get the materials for a new product, right?
Okay.
The procurement team, they might be laser focused on finding the absolute cheapest option, maybe overseas. But what about the employees here?
Right, if production moves overseas, they could lose their jobs.
Exactly. Or think about the community where that factory is being built. What's the environmental impact? Then you've got your customers, and like we talked about, they're getting more demanding. They want to know that the products they're buying are made ethically.
It's amazing how something that seems like, oh, we just need to buy some stuff, can actually be so complex.
It really is. And it gets even more interesting when you start looking at how different sectors approach procurement.
Oh, yeah. My notes mentioned something about that, like how procurement works differently in the public sector versus, say, a private company or a nonprofit.
Right. So let's start with the public sector. Governments, schools, hospitals, that kind of thing. They have a lot of rules to follow, right?
Because they're spending taxpayer money, right?
Exactly. They need to be able to prove that they're getting the best value for the taxpayer's dollar. So there are very specific procedures they have to follow, very strict rules about how contracts are awarded. It has to be fair and open.
That makes sense. But all those rules, all that bureaucracy, that must really slow things down, right?
It can. And sometimes it makes it hard for smaller companies or, know your businesses to compete for those contracts. But on the flip side, it also helps to prevent corruption and make sure that the process is fair.
Okay, so there's a trade-off. What about private companies? How do they approach procurement?
Private companies, they have a bit more freedom. Their main goal is usually to make money, to be profitable, so they're always looking for ways to do things faster, cheaper, and better than their competitors.
So they're probably a lot quicker to adopt new technologies like that e-procurement stuff we were talking about.
Yeah, exactly. And they might be more willing to source materials from all over the world if it means getting a lower price.
It's a balancing act, though, right? They still need to make sure the quality is good, that they're being ethical, that they're building those good relationships with their suppliers.
You've got it. It's all connected.
Now, we can't forget about the nonprofits, the charities. They're doing really important work, but they often have really tight budgets. How do they handle procurement?
Nonprofits are often incredibly resourceful. They have to make every penny count. So they might prioritize working with local suppliers or with companies that have a social mission, even if it costs a little bit more.
So their purchasing decisions are about more than just the bottom line.
Absolutely. They want to support businesses that align with their values.
This has been so eye-opening. We've gone from what even is procurement to understanding these really complex systems that affect everything around us.
It's like looking behind the curtain, seeing how everything works.
Exactly. And it's made me realize that every time I buy something, I'm actually making a choice.
You are. And those choices, they all add up.
Well, on that note, I think we've covered a lot of ground today. Any final thoughts before we wrap up this deep dive?
I think the most important thing to remember is that procurement and supply chains are always evolving. What we've talked about today is just a snapshot. As technology continues to change, as consumer preferences shift, as the world becomes even more interconnected, the way we buy and sell things is going to continue to change too.
That's a great point. So it's not just about understanding where things are now, but also thinking about where they're headed in the future.
Exactly.
Well, I'm definitely going to keep thinking about all of this. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive. It's been fascinating.
Thanks for having me.